In November 1988, in Misato, Japan, a shocking case unfolded when a high school girl named Junko Furuta fell victim to days of unimaginable captivity and brutal torture at the hands of four teenage boys. This incident went beyond an individual crime, raising grave questions about the roles of family, school, and society, as the perpetrators were all minors. Why did an innocent young girl have to endure such unbearable suffering? What drove these teenagers to such monstrous cruelty? Stay with us until the end to uncover this heartbreaking story, a dark wound in the history of Japanese crime, and to reflect on the values that seem lost in society. The fateful evening of a kind-hearted girl. Junko was born on January 18, 1971. When this story occurred, she was only 17 years old, a student at Kaseo Minami High School in Saitama Prefecture. She was a cheerful, sweet girl, loved by many of her classmates. Junko's father worked as a business director at a canning factory, while her mother was a homemaker. Though her family was not wealthy, they relied primarily on her father's income. To ease her family's financial burden, Junko decided to work after graduating high school. In addition to her studies, she took on part-time jobs, working at a household goods store or packing at a plastic factory to contribute to her family's needs. As graduation approached, she applied for a job with a company and successfully passed the interview. Her future seemed bright. After graduation, she would start working, embarking on a new journey in life. But no one could have predicted the terrible event that awaited her on her way home that fateful evening. On Friday, November 25, 1988, a clear afternoon, Junko followed her routine. After school, she went to her part-time job at the plastic factory. At 8:20 p.m., she finished work and began her journey home. The quiet road was dimly lit, with only a few street lights, and it seemed deserted. Suddenly, a stranger on a motorbike approached from behind and kicked her forcefully, causing both her and her bike to crash onto the ground. Before she could gather her senses, the man sped off. As Junko was struggling to stand up, a young man appeared, offering her help. He warned that her attacker was from the underworld and might come back to harm her, suggesting he could escort her home for safety. Though shaken and dizzy from the fall, Junko saw a seemingly kind person before her and believed he was trustworthy. Grateful and reassured, she walked beside him, pushing her bicycle as they made their way down the dimly lit road. As they walked into a more secluded area, the young man stopped and revealed his true intentions. He told Junko that he, too, was a member of a local gang, and the man on the motorbike earlier was actually his accomplice. Introducing himself as Hiroshi Miyano, an 18-year-old high school dropout, he suddenly threatened her, saying that if she agreed to spend the night with him, he would let her go. If not, she would pay with her life. Overwhelmed by terror, Junko had no choice but to comply with his demand. At 1:50 a.m., Hiroshi took her to a nearby hotel, where he assaulted her. However, rather than fulfilling his promise to release her, a darker plan began to form in his mind. He called 3 of his gang members to gather at a park. These were Yoogata, Shinji Minato, and Yasushi Watanabe, the man on the motorbike who had knocked her down earlier. At around 3 a.m., the 3 young men arrived at the park in a car, waiting for Hiroshi and Junko. Once they arrived, they searched her school bag and found a diary with her home address. They threatened her, saying that if she tried to escape, they would come to her home and kill her family. Terrified, Junko believed them, resigned to following their commands in the hope of sparing her loved ones. After a brief discussion, the group decided to take Junko to Shinji's house, one of the gang members. His home was located in the Azashi area of Itachi Ward, Tokyo. It was a 2-story house with an electric pole outside that Shinji and his friends often used to sneak into the second floor without using the front door. Shinji lived there with his parents and brother. His parents occupied the first floor, while he and his brother lived on the second. That morning, they brought Junko to a bedroom on the second floor, where they imprisoned her. At the time, Shinji's father was away on a trip, leaving only his mother and brother at home. Initially, fearing Junko might resist, they treated her with a degree of care. For her part, Junko hoped that if she complied, they would eventually release her, so she refrained from attempting an escape. However, Hiroshi grew concerned that Junko's parents might alert the police due to her absence, so he forced her to call home. Over the phone, Junko told her family that she felt emotionally unwell and was staying with a friend for a while to have some space. Her parents, trusting her words, didn't suspect anything was wrong. 41 days of unimaginable horror. 2 days later, on November 28th, the group grew bored and sought entertainment. They invited 2 more friends over to Shinji's house to join in. The noise from the room caught the attention of Shinji's father, who had just returned from his trip. Shinji lied, claiming that Junko was his new girlfriend, and asked his father not to disturb them. Believing his son, the father left them alone. And so, in that room, the 6 young men unleashed a reign of terror on Junko, as she endured the unthinkable in a state of absolute horror and despair. One day, Shinji's mother went upstairs to clean and happened upon Junko in the room. Surprised to see her still there after so long, she simply told Junko she should go home soon and left without questioning further. The bitter cold of December made Junko's suffering even worse. She was forced to endure humiliating tasks, at times left standing outside on the balcony without a shred of clothing. Exhausted and terrified, she eventually fainted from the unbearable cold and exhaustion. As time passed, Junko continued to endure unspeakable cruelty from the group. To avoid suspicion, Hiroshi occasionally forced her to call home, ensuring her family wouldn't suspect anything was wrong. Seeing her compliance only fueled their sadistic pleasure, leading them to escalate their torment. Whenever they grew tired, one would stay to watch over her while others went out to buy food, only to continue their depraved acts upon returning. Hiroshi even used a video camera to record these horrific moments and forced Junko to watch. One day, Hiroshi told Junko a cruel lie, saying her father had died in a car accident. Seeing the pain on her face, he laughed and revealed it was only a joke. This kind of emotional torture became a regular form of amusement, as they taunted her with heartless words and threats. At one point, one of the group members expressed a desire to release her, but the others quickly discovered his intentions and warned him to fall in line. Each time she showed distress or pleaded for mercy, they only became more ruthless, finding joy in her suffering. Junko attempted to escape multiple times. Once, on the 13th day of her captivity, while her captors were asleep, she summoned every ounce of strength to run downstairs, locate a phone, and call the police. But before she could fully describe her situation, Hiroshi caught her, snatched the phone, hung up, and called back to explain it had only been a friend's prank. To punish her for attempting to call for help, he poured gasoline on her legs and set them on fire. The flames engulfed her, causing severe burns that left her unable to walk. The gang further burned other areas of her body, resulting in untreated wounds that festered and emitted a foul odor. Shinji's parents sensed something was terribly wrong but were too intimidated by the boys to intervene. Shinji's brother, aware of the situation, would sometimes bring milk and bread for Junko but dared not inform the authorities. Her burns left her in unbearable agony, forcing her to lie on the floor, unable to move, and resort to urinating where she lay. In response, her captors mocked her helplessness, forcing her to consume her waste or beating her for dirtying the floor. The continuous physical and psychological torture took an unimaginable toll, leaving Junko's face swollen and disfigured. Even as she lay frail and unrecognizable, the boys continued their abuse, ignoring her weakened state. Eventually, they realized she was no longer able to resist or react, having become useless for their amusement. And with that realization, they began plotting their next move. A heartless plan to hide their crime. On the 41st day, Hiroshi, having lost a large sum of money gambling, arrived at Shinji's house in a fit of rage and took his frustration out on Junko. By then, she was barely conscious, clinging to life with only faint awareness. Hiroshi grabbed a heavy iron bar weighing 1.7 kilograms and beat her abdomen continuously for 2 hours. The following morning, January 5th, the group discovered that Junko had died. They had prepared for this moment. Hiroshi stole a truck from his former workplace, Gathering cement, sand, and a metal drum, they placed her body inside the drum, filled it with cement, and readied it for disposal. Hiroshi, being superstitious, feared that Junko's spirit might return to haunt him. To appease her, he placed a videotape of her favorite Japanese TV drama, Dragonfly, inside the drum, a show she often mentioned during her captivity. They mixed cement, poured it into the drum, and sealed it tightly with duct tape. At 8 p.m., they drove toward Tokyo Bay, intending to dump the barrel into the sea. However, traffic delayed them, and fearing police checks, they changed course, abandoning the drum in a grassy area near a coastal park by Tokyo Bay. Afterward, they meticulously cleaned the truck, returned to Shinji's house, and destroyed anything that could link them to Junko. Uncovering the crime, a tale of agony and anger in the autopsy room. On January 23, 1989, 98 days after Junko's death, Hiroshi and Ogura were arrested by the police for sexually assaulting another young woman. Initially, both believed the police had discovered Junko's remains, leading them to reveal some details of the crime. Later, they realized they were only under arrest for the separate incident, but fear had already gripped them, and they confessed to their involvement in Junko's case, subsequently being detained at a juvenile center in Tokyo. Based on their partial confessions, police suspected the two were involved in other crimes and decided to search Hiroshi and Ogura's residences. On March 29, 1989, investigators found several women's undergarments in Hiroshi's home. Under separate interrogation, Hiroshi assumed Ogura had already confessed to Junko's murder and admitted everything, recounting the entire incident. On March 30, 1989, the case officially entered investigation. Following Hiroshi's confession, police located the drum containing Junko's body, severely decomposed, identifiable only through fingerprints. The autopsy revealed horrific injuries. Her face was unrecognizable. Most of her teeth were broken. Her chest was punctured with metal pins. Her intestines were damaged. Her hair torn out down to the scalp. Doctors found foreign objects, including shards of glass, inside her uterus, and confirmed that she had been pregnant. Through the tracing of a call Junko had made to her family, the police tracked down Shinji's house and arrested the entire group, including Shinji's brother. This case quickly garnered major attention due to the involvement of juvenile offenders and the extreme brutality of their actions. The dark backgrounds of heartless individuals. As for the backgrounds of the suspects, Hiroshi, the main perpetrator, was the son of a stockbroker and a piano teacher. His family was relatively well off, but with both parents absorbed in their careers. Hiroshi was raised by his grandmother until he graduated from elementary school, after which he returned to live with his parents, growing up with little parental care. Hiroshi's relationship with his family was strained. To make up for the emotional distance, his parents frequently overlooked his misbehavior and tried to fulfill his material and financial needs. In middle school, Hiroshi enrolled in a judo program, where he learned fighting skills, which he would later use to bully classmates. By March 1988, Hiroshi had dropped out of school and become involved in street gangs. Disturbed by his choices, his family urged him to avoid such dangerous friends and arranged a job for him at a construction materials company. But Hiroshi ignored them entirely. After a prolonged argument, during which he even struck his mother, his father, upon learning of this, expelled him from the house. From then on, Hiroshi established a gang of similarly troubled young people, becoming the leader of an extreme youth group focused on extortion and theft. Ogura, one of Hiroshi's gang members, was just 17. His father worked as a transport worker, while his mother was employed at a hotel. After his parents divorced when he was in 3rd grade, Ogura lived with his mother. In middle school, Ogura met Hiroshi, quickly dropped out, and joined Hiroshi's gang. Minato, another member, was even younger, only 16. His father was an administrative director at a hospital, and his mother was a nurse. However, Minato's family life was turbulent, with frequent parental arguments, after which his father would often take out his anger on Minato and his brother. Growing up in this environment, Minato developed a volatile temperament and often attacked his classmates. When his brother's motorbike was stolen one day, he turned to Hiroshi for help retrieving it, and from that point, they became close friends. To avoid his father's beatings, Minato sometimes invited Hiroshi and his gang over to his house. Though Minato's father strongly disapproved of his son's friends, he didn't dare intervene, while his mother, powerless to stop them, turned a blind eye. Among Hiroshi's group was Yasushi Watanabe, 17. His parents had divorced when he was young, leaving him to live with his mother and sister. His mother worked at a beauty salon and was often busy. In middle school, Hiroshi began dating Yasushi's sister, leading to Yasushi's introduction to the gang. The tragic case laid bare the unstable backgrounds and unchecked behaviors that contributed to the development of these young offenders, highlighting a society grappling with the failure to protect both its vulnerable victims and its misguided youth. Tears of mourning for Junko's fate. Tragedy struck when Junko's life, stolen by unspeakable cruelty, came to an end. Her family held a funeral shrouded in deep sorrow. A classmate sent a condolence letter, expressing that they never imagined seeing her under such heartbreaking circumstances. Friends wrote about how she must have suffered immensely and vowed she would never be forgotten. The principal awarded her an honorary diploma, with a message of comfort that, wherever she may be, everyone is with her in spirit, wishing her peace, free from pain. Rest in peace. The words of farewell resonated with sorrow. Ordinarily, juvenile crimes in Japan are handled by the juvenile court system. However, due to the heinous nature of this case, it was transferred to Tokyo District Court for trial. Prosecutors charged the 4 young men with unlawful confinement, intentional murder, and corpse disposal. On July 31, 1989, the trial officially commenced. The prosecution argued that, though the accused were juveniles, their actions constituted an unprecedented crime in Japanese history, deserving to be judged by adult standards for an atrocity beyond the comprehension of an ordinary person. A controversial verdict and the outrage behind the case. During the trial, the 4 defendants initially pled guilty, but their defense attorney later argued they were merely juveniles and had not intended to kill Junko. According to the defense, the accused had only continued their assaults without intending her death. On May 21, 1990, after 10 months of proceedings, the case finally reached a conclusion. Hiroshi was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Ogura received a sentence of 5 to 15 years. Shinji was given 4 to 6 years, and Yasushi received 3 to 4 years. 3 of the 7 other accomplices were also sent to juvenile detention centers. However, the prosecution deemed these sentences too lenient and appealed to Tokyo High Court. On July 12, 1991, Tokyo High Court issued its final ruling. Aside from Ogura, who retained his original sentence, the other sentences were increased. Hiroshi's sentence was raised to 25 years, Shinji's to 5 to 9 years, and Yasushi's to 5 to 7 years. Though the prosecution remained dissatisfied, the High Court explained that, under Japanese law at the time, juvenile offenders were entitled to leniency. This case left an enduring impact on Japanese society, not only for its brutality but also for the debates surrounding juvenile justice and punishment. It sparked nationwide grief and fury, becoming a stark reminder of the dire consequences of failing to address youth violence and the urgency of reform in the justice system. Following the sentencing, the parents of the convicted expressed a desire to apologize to Junko's family and hoped their children would be given a chance to reform. However, Junko's family declined the apology. According to a civil court ruling, Hiroshi's mother had to sell their house, raising 50 million yen, about $350,000 by today's rates, to compensate Junko's family. Ogura's father also contributed a portion of his income to a trust managed by a lawyer for restitution. Although Shinji's parents were aware of their son's criminal behavior, they faced no charges, which deeply upset Junko's family, prompting them to file a civil lawsuit, seeking compensation from Shinji's parents. In 1995, Yasushi was released from prison, yet the bullying he endured while incarcerated left him with a severe fear of people. After his release, he became withdrawn and confined himself to his home. In 1997, Shinji was also released and moved away from Misato with his family. but he struggled to find work and, in 2018, was arrested again for assault, receiving an 18-month sentence. Ogura was freed in 1999, changed his name to Yo Kamasaki, and got married. However, in 2003, he was arrested again for another crime and sentenced to 4 more years in prison. Hiroshi was granted parole in 2009, changed his name to Yokojama Hiroshi, but in 2013, he was arrested again for fraud. This case remains one of the most shocking juvenile crime cases in Japan. Despite pledges to avoid future crimes, each of the convicted individuals continued to re-offend after their release. The incident sparked fierce debate in Japanese society over juvenile crime and the responsibilities of young offenders. Many argued that the age of criminal responsibility should be reconsidered, as this case underscored the critical role of family and upbringing in preventing youth delinquency. Had there been early intervention, this heartbreaking tragedy might have been averted. Though decades have passed, this case still stands as one of the most haunting stains on Japan's criminal history. What are your thoughts on today's story? Feel free to leave a comment below to share with us. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Decoder Box channel so you won't miss any updates on our latest videos. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.